A bit of a controversial one today. I wanted to discuss my top 5 most overrated watches I feel just aren't worth the money, in my opinion. So, guys, let's get right into it. Guys, before the video starts, I'd really appreciate if you drop a like on this video and of course subscribe for more videos like this in the future. At this point, as I'm filming this video, we're right around 4,500 subscribers. I'd really love to hit 10,000 by the end of the year. I know it's a lofty goal, but I know we can do it with all of your support. Thank you so much. So guys, I know this is going to be a controversial one. I want to, of course, put a disclaimer. This is just my personal opinion, just my personal experience. What makes this hobby so great, I think, is the fact that we all have different tastes and styles, right? At the end of the day, what I personally like and enjoy is not necessarily going to be what the masses or what you like and enjoy, and that's totally okay. At the end of the day, we all have different tastes and styles, and that's what makes this hobby so fun and interesting. If we all had the same watches and the same collections, it would be such a boring hobby with no real excitement. And so that's why I wanted to share today what I feel are some of the most overrated watches, just to ultimately share my opinion and of course, get your feedback from collectors who have potentially owned watches in this list or outside of this list, and maybe share your feedback as to why you did or didn't like them. Starting out with my first choice, and it's definitely going to be a controversial one, and is the Patek Philippe Aquanaut, specifically in the reference 5167A. Now, I know this may be very, very weird for me to say this. I've sold many Aquanauts in my day, but I tell people this all the time. This is a watch that currently trades pending year in condition all the way from 55 to 65,000, and I just don't feel the price is ultimately justified. We're talking about a stainless steel watch that's simple, time only, and of course is on a rubber strap. It's a watch that retails in the $30,000 and sells on the secondary market nearly double list. When I handle this watch versus say a Patek Philippe annual calendar or a Patek Philippe dress watch of some kind, of World Time or any of these other watches, I just feel they're so much superior in terms of overall quality. Of course, we're talking about a totally different genre, but we're also talking about these watches selling in sometimes in excess of $20,000 less than a Patek Philippe Aquanaut. And in the ownership experience of a lot of collectors who I've worked with, who I've sold Aquanauts to, when they initially look for it, they lust for it, they love it, and then when they ultimately get it, they're felt a little bit disappointed. Again, it's a watch that doesn't have that much weight. It's a sleek watch, very great for everyday wear, but at $60,000 to $65,000, it's hard to find value. And really, I don't know if most collectors find it necessarily worth it because, again, it's just that simple time-only watch on a rubber strap in stainless steel. It's meant to be an entry-level watch from Patek, and I think it certainly is in the way that it wears, right? It's not something that will blow your socks off, when you ultimately get it. It doesn't have that special feeling when you put it on wrist, in my opinion. That's just my personal experience with the watch and the experience of a lot of collectors that I know. It's totally up to you if you feel it's justified. Me personally, I don't see it. I think there's so much value outside of the sports watch range from Patek Philippe. And I think you could say generally that a lot of the Aquanauts and a lot of even the Nautilus models, a 5711/1A, for example, with a blue or a white dial, trading anywhere from 80 to 100, 120,000, depending on the year it was produced. And I just don't see the value. I see maybe the value more in like something with a complication, a 5712, or like, in the Aquanauts, a 5164, 5968. I still think they're really expensive for what they are, but I understand, especially in the Nautilus range, the value there, right? It's a Genta design, it's a Genta watch, it's got history, it's got lineage, it's Patek Philippe. In some cases, it's got a complication, right? There's things that go for it, but a Patek Philippe 5167A is just that simple time-only watch that, I don't know, it just doesn't do it for me. And so for me, I always felt it's an overrated watch, especially in my personal experience. Now, my second choice is going to be another very controversial one. It's something that has arisen, especially over the last couple of years, due to watch TikTok, and that is vintage Cartiers. Now, I'll say this, I'm a big fan of Cartier's collection Privé. I think they make some of the most amazing watches with JLC, Piaget, and other off-the-shelf movements that are really highly finished, highly decorated, and of course, have that incredible design history and design language, of course, of Cartier, which I think is probably the best design house, arguably, in the watch industry, period. But I would say this, Cartier has made a lot of junk over the years. I think most watch collectors would agree. They've made a lot of killer pieces and a lot of junk. And in the vintage world, it's hard to sometimes discern, of course, what is junk and what is really a winner, right? What's a dog and what's, of course, not a dog. And so it really takes a certain type of not just mindset, but also feedback from people who are trusted advisors to really buy right. And at the same time, these are pretty small watches, things that I don't personally vibe with. I'm not a big vintage guy at all. I actually don't own any vintage watches. I really don't ever sell vintage watches, nor do I really like vintage watches. It's just not my personal thing, right? And so for that reason, I've never really vibed with vintage Cartier because I understand, in some cases the provenance and the importance of them, but it's just not a watch for me personally. And so when I see some of these tanks or, these, of course, tanks and trays, even Cartier crashes that are going for, in some cases, over $1 million, I'm just like, I don't get this at all. And again, that's just my personal opinion. I understand if some people totally disagree and see the merits of ownership, but this is a market that was far, far less desirable for a couple of years, for many years, actually, until really you start to see it explode in popularity. I would say due to watch TikTok and like this hipster kind of Cartier movement, which again, I'm all for, love it, love a lot of the videos from the guys of like Mike Nouveau and all that kind of stuff. It's just not a market I understand. And for that reason, I just think it's a little bit overrated. Now, my third pick, it should come as no surprise to most watch collectors. And I think most watch collectors would agree with me on this. And that is specific watches from Richard Mille. I'm talking the Richard Mille RM11 and RM1103. Now, I know for many watch collectors, they're going to really hate on Richard Mille, and I'm not personally in that boat. I am a big fan of the brand. I like a lot of their watches, specifically the 67s. I like also the Bubba Watsons, the Nadals. I think they make a lot of genius, innovative watches that are underappreciated by the watch collecting market. And I think their use of innovative materials and, of course, with different concepts is supremely underrated in the watch industry today. And of course, I think that Richard Mille has fallen off a cliff just in terms of overall ingenuity, right? If you go back to the early 2000s to the 2010s, what Richard Mille was doing with Renault and Papi was simply groundbreaking, right? I'm talking split-second chronographs with different complications, split-second tourbillons. We're talking about G sensors. We're talking about things that we've almost never seen in the watch industry today since or have created, again, really in the modern context. So I'm talking specifically the RM11 and 1103 for one reason only. Although these are the quintessential, I would say, Richard Mille chronographs, these feature an off-the-shelf modified Parmigiani movement, and they trade in titanium and rose gold for about 100 to 150,000. I think that's just an astronomical number considering you're getting what is essentially an off-the-shelf Parmigiani movement. Of course, getting that incredibly iconic and I would say very recognizable Richard Mille case and design, but I just don't see the value just based on the overall nuts and bolts of the actual watch. Right? If I'm dissecting a watch, I'm taking into consideration the movement, I'm taking into consideration the brand, the design, and all that kind of stuff. And I understand the upcharge of Richard Mille because of the brand, because of the status, because of the allure of its watches, but I just don't get it when we're talking about such a kind of entry-level basic movement to a certain extent. So I just don't see the value in an RM11, RM1103, specifically in titanium and in rose gold. I like a lot of the special editions that they did. I think that they're a little bit more value packed when we talk about like kind of the carbons and the ceramics and that kind of stuff that they did in very limited quantities. And that, again, I think pack that innovative material that makes RM watches so distinct. And that's what I think appeals to me the most. But at the end of the day, just a simple titanium chronograph with a Parmigiani base movement just doesn't appeal to me. And at 100 to 150,000, in some cases even more, I really don't see the value at all. And so that's why I think overall it's an overrated watch. And despite it being that quintessential RM chronograph that's supremely popular and extremely desirable on the secondary market, me personally, I just don't see the value there at all. Next up is going to be a specific genre of watch, and that is modern Kandjar stamped watches. Now, for those who don't know, the Kandjar stamp is done specifically for the family of the Sultan of Oman, at least in a modern context. Now, if we go back prior to his unfortunate passing, of course, those were special ordered by the Sultan himself, and typically the stamp of the royal family was actually done on the dial. Now, today, that stamp is typically done actually on the case back, either it's etched or engraved on the case back, and ultimately, I just don't feel they're as special as they used to be for a simple reason. Nowadays, the entire family has access to order these watches. So we're talking about far more supply out there on the market. And I just feel that a case back engraving, and especially the quantities that they're being made in, just is not as special as, for example, when they were actually stamped on the dial itself. Now, I'm not talking about all Kandjar watches, just to be clear. I'm talking about specifically modern Kandjar watches. I just don't think they are as special as they used to be. Again, this is just my personal opinion. No knock on anybody who's bought modern Conjar watches. It's just a market that I personally don't understand, nor do I see value in. And ultimately, it's something that I would recommend most watch collectors stay away from, just as a general basis, because I don't see the value in paying a 20 to 30% premium over the market price of that watch if we're talking about anything outside of Rolex. And then anything within Rolex, that premium is even higher. In some cases, 50 to 100+% of the value of the watch. Again, I just don't see the value in it, but if you do, that's amazing, and by all means, go out and buy it. And last but not least, I wanted to throw out an independent watchmaker in there, one that I actually regard very highly, and that is the apprentice of George Daniels, Roger W. Smith. Now, his watches are amazing, no doubt about it, but I just feel that the modern retail pricing of Roger Smith, now in excess of $400,000, just is not something that I really vibe with at all. I think the whole spirit of an independent watch is to have not only a watchmaker make something by hand in his atelier and really go painstakingly through the process of creating a timeless classic and a timeless wristwatch for you to not only wear and enjoy in your lifetime, but to pass it on to future generations. I just don't see that with Roger Smith anymore. It just feels like his wristwatches now have become a total cash grab, for lack of a better word. I mean, at nearly a $500,000 retail now, it just doesn't make sense to me how you can charge customers so much when your retail price just a few years ago was a fraction of that. I'm talking about less than 50% of its current price point. The retail prices have climbed so much now that auction prices have caught up with them. And that's crazy to think about, considering that Roger Smith does not make that many watches. I mean, we're talking about probably less than 100. And if I was a betting man, maybe even less than 60 to 80 watches per year on an annual basis, right? So we're talking about 10 to 12 watches maybe leaving his factory on a monthly basis. It's an extremely rare watch. And I just feel like Roger Smith has piggybacked off of the fact that he was the only apprentice of George Daniels. And to a certain extent, I just don't see the innovation and the ingenuity that he's come out with. He hasn't created any groundbreaking complications. He hasn't done anything that is that earth-shattering overall. I've seen independent watchmakers push the boundaries of design, of complications, of all these different things, and they charge far significantly less in terms of the overall price point than a Roger Smith time-only watch. Sure, it features a coaxial escapement, but again, at nearly $400,000 or in some cases over $400,000, I don't see the value at all. And unfortunately, the Roger Smith brand is definitely suffering as a result. So guys, this is my top 5 most overrated watches that I feel just aren't worth the money. Again, totally my personal opinion. Feel free to disagree with me down in the comments below. I always love to hear your feedback, of course. And of course, please be sure to let me know what you think are some of the most overrated watches based on your personal ownership experience. It's always good to learn from you guys, the watch collecting community. Guys, if you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate if you leave a like on it. Subscribe for more videos like this in the future. Guys, my name is Marco for the Berdines Jewelry YouTube channel. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.